I love stories. I much prefer reading a story in a book to watching a story on my computer or my television. That's just me. I'm a print person. I guess I'm kind of old school along the way. Not I'm against movies. I enjoy movies and things. But if I have my choice, I'm reading a book or I'm reading a comic book. One of those two. Some of my favorite books, some of my favorite stories, and a lot of you know these, and I've shared these before you, the Lord of the Rings trilogy or the Harry Potter series. I also like the, going back, 60 years now. I like the James Bond, 70 years. I like the original Ian Fleming James Bond books. Some of the other ones that I've liked is, if you know Umberto Eco, The Name of the Rose, and C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce. I've had conversations with some of you about the comic books that I like. I like stories. There's nothing like a good story. And the Bible is made up of mostly stories. Now there are other things in there. There are poems, and there is law, and there are letters. But story or narrative makes up the majority of our Bible. And the stories in the Bible are not just there for entertainment or to give us knowledge or to help me fall asleep at night. But these Bible stories, like the one that we are currently reading right now, the Exodus story, the book of Exodus in the Hebrew Bible, it's intended to do something in the lives of its readers. That's where we are this morning. I'm not going to read sections of it for this short devotional, but we're in the actual Exodus, the parting of the Red Sea, roughly chapters 13, 14, 15. That's where we are. And God is delivering His people. God has delivered His people. It's God's story of His salvation and His deliverance of His people out of captivity, out of Egypt, into a new life and into a new land. Great, powerful, wonderful story. Story of God's salvation and His deliverance. The thing is, it's a story written after the fact, like all stories, most stories, unless it's written down at the time it's happening. It's probably not what's he doing here in Exodus. It's written afterwards. But it's helping the people through this story realize, in hindsight, for people who weren't actually there, what kind of God that they serve. Well, they serve a God who cares enough about them and who loves them enough to deliver them out of Egypt. He's a God who controls all creation. This is also a story that helps the people, the Hebrew people, and us as well today, to remember the kind of people God wants us to be because of the kind of God He is. That how God has acted in the past informs how we are to live today. That's what the Exodus story was doing for those Hebrew people, and it's what it's doing for us as we read it today, informing us because of who God is, what kind of life we are to live in the here and now. That we live in a God who's in a loving covenant relationship with us and who wants our lives transformed because of that, and to live in obedience to His commands. True then, true today. It's a story that continued throughout the whole, what we call Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, all the way to Jesus. And it's really summed up in what we often call this new Exodus in Jesus, where Jesus now delivers His people not out of Egyptian captivity, but out of the captivity to sin and to death into new life. Now we live accordingly. Now we live a new life because of what Jesus has done for us. So as you read more stories in Exodus, as you read more stories in the Bible, think about, what's this telling me about God? And what's this telling me about what it means to move from an old life to a new life, from death to life, serving a God who is God over all creation. Thank you for joining me this week. I look forward to seeing you next week.